Last night I had the privilege of speaking at our local meetup. I talked about how to create financial freedom with the FBRRRS method, which I've talked about the BRRRS method on this channel ad nauseum because it is the best way to create wealth without using any of your own money. I own $40 million worth of real estate without spending a dime of my own money with the BRRRS method. But last night I added the F in front to get people started on that path. I want to talk about how you can create financial freedom no matter what your situation. I'm going to walk you through the steps so that you can do that, give you some advice on how to create financial freedom and get your path started now. Hope you enjoy the video.
But there's some key points I want to make that I think will help people, because this is the hardest step for most people for sure, is getting over that fear and getting started. The next step is to buy. The next step is to rehab. The next step is to rent, refinance, and scale, which if you've not heard me talk, you probably have heard the refinance, but the scale is something that I added that we'll talk about. But what is that, 6 letters up there are what Luke's and I have utilized and learned and screwed up and got better and improved to buy $40 million worth of real estate, which 20 of it has come in the last 12 to 14 months. And, you know, our goal is to do a lot more than that. So those letters may just look like letters to you, but I would like you to understand them, not just know them by the end of this presentation, give you some pointers along the way, because this is very, 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 that's 3 varies, powerful, because it's created financial freedom for me, and it is creating financial freedom for a lot of people. So fear, what is fear? Fear is kind of not knowing what's next, the fear of the unknown, just not knowing what's going to happen and assuming that it's going to be bad, whatever's going to happen. It's like an innate instinct in us, probably to protect us in life and death situations. So it's a pretty deep-rooted emotion, and it seems to get in the way of people all the time. They're too afraid to start something or do something or take a chance on themselves, so they don't end up ever starting. So what I want to talk about is 3 ways that, you know, I have utilized to overcome that fear and get to the other side, because whether you know it or not, a lot of people are stuck at this step. The first is having a base level of knowledge. If you kind of know what's happening and have an educated guess at what's going to happen next, that should lessen the fear just a little bit. You know, having a base level of knowledge, which everybody's doing here tonight, you can continue to do by coming here every single month, by, you know, hopefully following me on social media as well as other people and doing, you know, what people are teaching, taking their knowledge as well as your knowledge is a huge step in helping overcome the fear. Because if you feel like you are prepared or you know what's going to happen, it's a little less scary to take that leap. The second is experience. Now, obviously, if you haven't invested at all, you don't have that experience, but you can learn from other people's experience, and then every little step along the way is just a step that should build confidence as you're getting more experience. So it's something that obviously you have to get started to have, but you can learn from other people's experience. And anybody that you look up to, like whether it be your parents, whether it be a business person, Elon Musk, whether it be a president, whether it be Mother Teresa, whoever you look up to had a lot of fear, and they overcame it anyway. So just knowing that that person that you put on a pedestal was scared too should offer a little bit of encouragement. And then I think the biggest reason why Luke and I have been successful and how we overcome fear is just stupidity. Like, we're just going to go do it and figure it out and borrow a ton of money and try to make it work. So just kind of that blind ignorance of we'll figure it out as we go, and maybe not always making the best decision at every step along the way has been huge in helping us be successful. So there's your fear. And again, I'm going to go over an example of the BRRRRS here in a second. So the first key step to creating a rental portfolio and, you know, using other people's money to create financial freedom through owning rental properties is you have to buy a property at a deep discount. Buying at a deep discount will create equity. You can literally sign a sheet of paper And when you close on that property because you bought it at a discount, there's equity built in. You're getting equity with your signature. Now, the best way to buy at a discount is buying distressed properties. You're not going to, most likely, especially in today's market and what the market has been doing over the past several years, you're not going to be able to find a discounted property that is rent ready or retail ready. You're only going to be able to find something that is at a discount because it's distressed. So finding those distressed properties are extremely important. It's all about setting the rest of the process up for success, and finding a distressed property is a huge way to do that. So what are the top 3 ways that you can find distressed properties, and where do you find them? Number 1 is wholesalers. Who's a wholesaler in the room? Raise your hand if you're a wholesaler in the room. Not a ton. All right, like 4 or 5. All right, well, not a ton of wholesalers. Well, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Go find wholesalers. So you're going to find wholesalers at your local meetups. Those "We Buy Houses" signs you see on the side of the roads, those little bitty signs, those are wholesalers. Most of those people do not close on properties. Most of those people do not ever, they either don't have the funding or don't want to close. So when you're driving around, just snap pictures of those and call them, text them, go to lunch with them, get to know them. They're wholesalers, and what wholesalers do is they do all the hard work for you. They send out the direct mailers. They, do Facebook ads. They drive for dollars. They negotiate with the home sellers. They find the distressed sellers, and they do everything, and then they bring the property to you with some meat on the bone so you can buy a distressed property at a discount and start the process. So they're your number 1 source for finding properties to start the BRRRRS method. So get to know wholesalers. Faster House, we're wholesalers here. So get to know wholesalers. They will make your job a lot easier if you don't want to put in that hard work and that energy and that effort, or don't have the time or money to find those distressed properties. You can find them from wholesalers. So they're a huge part of this process. Number 2 is real estate agents. Similarly, I didn't think I was going to say that one right. Similarly, they are in properties all day, every day. Now, most of them are in retail-ready properties. Most of them are in properties that, don't work because they're not distressed, so they're not going to be sold at a discount. However, most agents come across a couple distressed properties a year that they don't know what to do with. It's a hoarder house. Their client has to sell quick. It's super dated. They don't want to put it on the MLS, or the seller doesn't. Or there's just issues with the property and it won't pass inspection. So getting to know agents will help you, and you can offer them double commission if you're going to flip it. You can, they can keep both sides of the commission on the front end, meaning agents get paid, 3% to buy and 3% to sell. But if this agent brings you a property, you don't need to get paid if you're not an agent. Even if you are, you don't need to. You can let them keep the entire 6%. They can get paid to represent you and the seller. So they get paid double for selling a property that probably would be a pain in the ass for them to sell because of whatever issues are the reason it's being sold at a discount. So agents can be a huge resource for you. There's a lot of them in this room. So getting to know those 2 sources is huge. And then social media. So social media can, you don't have to try to be an influencer and post and teach and do all this stuff, but just being active on social media and posting, once a month that you're looking for distressed properties, or posting that you have a distressed property to sell, and just putting your name out there on your personal Facebook page, or on, local meetups or local real estate investing pages is a great way to find properties. I know a lot of people that buy a handful of properties a year from social media, and then they're also a source for wholesalers and agents. You're going to find wholesalers, you're going to find agents on social media. All right, so that's some ways to find distressed properties. Now that you've found that distressed property, you need to rehab it and create even more equity than you created when you bought it at a discount. Who else thinks I'm going to knock this over? Anybody else nervous about me having that out there? It's only water. So this is a step that scares a lot of people, because I know some people that don't know which way to turn a screwdriver, or to turn a screw if you want to tighten it or loosen it, or they don't know how to paint, and they're very, very, not very handy, I guess is a good way to put it. That's okay. That doesn't matter. I'm not super handy. Lucas isn't super handy. We can do a few things, but you don't need to be handy to be a successful rehabber. You just need to have a few things up your sleeve. The first suggestion I would suggest for people to be successful rehabbing is do some of the work yourself. Not all of it, even if you're super, super handy. You do all the work yourself, it's gonna take you longer, you're gonna have more holding costs. It's just not gonna be the most efficient way to do it. You may be saving money in the short term, but you may not be, because that 2-month rehab may take you 4 months to do on the evenings and weekends, or 6 months. So that may take longer, but I think you should do some of the work, even if you're not handy. If you're, not really good with tools and you're not even trusted with a power tool, you can still, rip out cabinets, or you can do some landscaping work, or you can, paint if you'd like to. So doing some of the work will allow you to save some money, but will also allow you to, be at the property a little bit more and keep an eye on the contracts if you have things hired out. If you're not doing any of the work and you're hiring everything out, you maybe will visit the property if something comes up, but you probably won't. However, if you're doing some of the work, then you should hopefully be there an evening a week or on the weekend, so you should be there a little bit more. So that's another reason to do a little bit of the work yourselves. The second is communication is key. Having a proper set of expectations and scope of work with contractors is huge, because if you do not communicate, they're just going to do things that may or may not be what you want. They may not be they may not be doing something wrong or screwing up. They're just doing what they think you want. And if you don't tell them what you want, then they're probably not going to do what you want. So communicating, over communicating, having good scopes of work, making sure to treat your contractors well is huge, because if you treat your roofer well and you pay them on time, communicate with them, guess what? They probably know a siding guy, and that siding guy probably knows a window guy, and that window guy probably knows a gal that paints, and the painter probably knows a flooring person. So you're going to get connected with a network of people that all work together. Good contractors hang out with other good contractors. So if you're not communicating well, and you're not paying on time, they're not going to refer you over to their buddy that does a different trade that you're looking for. So communicating and treating the tenant, or not the tenant, treating the contractor well is huge. And then also, hiring out project management is always a good option. Most project managers are going to charge, either a flat fee or 10 to 15%. So that $25,000 rehab, if you hire it out, is going to cost you $27,500 or less, probably, because the person who's running the project, if you knew, is going to be more efficient, they're going to be more effective, they're going to get it done in less time, and they're just going to probably put out a better product. So you might actually save money by spending a little bit more money in the long run. So don't be afraid to hire out. It's probably a really good option for most people at first. All right, pop quiz. I got to get a shirt out. So what is the most expensive and costly part about owning a rental property? The mortgage, insurance, turnover, or real estate taxes? Who knows the answer? Raise your hand. Turnover. All right, I'm just going to throw this. Somebody catch it. Oh, John, slippery hands. All right, cool. So yes, turnover is the most expensive part of owning rental properties. You can, do everything right, but if you have a tenant moving out often, you're not going to cash flow. If you have, in a 10-year period, if you have, 5 move-outs, you're probably not going to cash flow very much, because when a tenant leaves, you are not only not collecting rent, you still have taxes, you still have the mortgage, you still have insurance, you probably have, some minor repairs or upkeep that the tenant was not responsible for. There might be some things you have to repair that the tenant was responsible for, so it is just not a good time in the life cycle of your real estate investment. So if you can limit turnover, then you can cash a lot more. And you may think that you can't limit turnover, but you can for sure by getting a better tenant in place and doing some things on the front end to get a good tenant in place to increase your cash flow long term. So this next step is rent. So if you spend some more time up front, like I used to get frustrated at the time it took us to place a tenant. It'd take 3 weeks or 4 weeks, thinking that's a month that we're not getting rent, when we should just approve somebody if they make enough money, and that is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. If you spend a little more time up front, then your tenant may stay 4 or 5 years. I think our average tenant stays over 5 years in our single family rentals. So if you spend more time up front, getting a more qualified tenant, they're going to stay longer and they're going to pay on time. They're going to, have less headaches, and everything is just going to be much smoother. That 3-4 weeks of rent that you're missing out on could, you could not have to worry about turnover for a decade or half a decade, and that's going to put a lot more money in your pocket. And again, communication is key and respect is key here. If anybody follows me on social media, sometimes they see my posts about people hating landlords, and they hate landlords because they think that, housing is a human right and shouldn't have to be paid for, and landlords treat their tenants shitty, and all these things that does happen. But if you communicate and treat your tenants with respect from the beginning, then for the most part, they're going to do the same thing in return and see that you're not a slumlord or landlord that they hear about and read about. So communication and respect will go a long way. If you set the expectations at the beginning, you're in charge of this, you cut the grass, you shovel the driveway, contact me via this site or this number. If you need a maintenance request, I'll get to right. If you just set those expectations and communicate up front, everything is going to be so much easier. And I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. If you can get half the move-outs, this isn't an exact calculation, but if you can get half the move-outs, you're probably going to get twice the cash flow, I would say, at least. In that 10-year period, if you have a tenant move out every other year and you have 5 turnovers versus 2, you're going to cash flow a lot more, and you can control that. Usually I have Lucas up here so I can take drinks when he's talking, but not right now. All right. So let's talk about some property management options. So, there's 2 options. You can do it internally or you can hire out the property management process, because a lot of people are afraid to rehab, and probably even more people are afraid to get a tenant and they think they're not gonna be able to get a tenant. So your internal options, you need to consider if you want to do it yourself. Do you have the time to do it? Because doing it right does take time. You're going to have to approve applications. You're going to have to, talk to people. You're going to have to look over bank statements. You're going to have to run credit checks if you're going to do it all the right way. And you're going to have to talk to, their employer, talk to their previous landlord, those things. So it does take time. So if you have time and you want to do it, that's one thing. But if you want to do it but you don't have time, probably internal is not the best option for you. And maybe even more important is a good personality fit. If you're kind of a bleeding heart and you're a little more empathetic, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's probably not the best fit for you to be a landlord, because if you give some tenants an inch, they're going to take a mile. So if you're willing to believe that the tenant can't pay rent because their 8th grandma just passed away, for the 8th month in a row, they had a grandma pass away, then maybe, being a landlord is not for you. So if you don't have the personality type that can kind of set hard boundaries and stick to them, then I would probably not do it. When I go right here, it kind of stops. All right, okay. So here's some external options. You can hire it out. I'm going to show you some options for some, online software, some free and some paid options. But some things you have to consider if you want to go the external route is they may know the laws better than you. There are certain laws. There's fair federal housing laws and acts that you have to follow the law. You have to treat all tenants the same. You can't turn a tenant down for a reason and then, have another tenant have the same issue and accept them. So you have to treat all tenants the same way. You can set your guidelines to who you'll approve and won't approve as far as income and credit goes, but you have to do that for every tenant. The minute you let a tenant in that doesn't have the same credit score as all your other tenants, you got to start to do that going forward. So having somebody, hired out do that, and they know the laws and you're afraid of breaking the laws, that might be a good option to hire out. They're also going to be more efficient. You're going to not be spending the time to do it, but the things that they do, the background checks, the calls with the tenant, the expectations being set, they're just going to be more efficient because they do it. And then also another thing to consider is that it does cost more money. Most property management companies charge, 10% at least of rent, some a little less. Some will charge a full month's rent or half month's rent to get the property leased up. So there's those things to consider. It's nice to hire it out, but it does cost more money. And then here's some options, some software options you can use. The top few are some free options. Most of them are something that is free for up to 10 properties, then you're charged. And then there's some paid options. We've used Buildium and Appfolio. My favorite's Buildium for the paid option. That's just me personally, but there are options out there that you can do it yourself, but then these softwares do the credit check, the background check for you, and they actually give you a recommendation to approve a tenant or not. So there are options out there. You can completely hire it out, or you can, do some of it yourself and use property management software for the others. So having a good tenant, I can't stress the importance of spending the right amount of time at the beginning to get a good tenant. If your goal is financial freedom and more cash flow, spend more time approving good tenants. All right, the refinance step. This is usually the most confusing for people because this is where you're going to, and again, I'll show you an example. This is where we're going to take your property to a small local bank and you're going to refinance it and do a cash out refinance to pay off whoever you borrowed the money from at the beginning. Again, don't get too caught up on, the numbers. I'll go over those in a second. But why do you go to small local banks? You go to small local banks is because they have the flexibility to get creative and make these loans work. If you take a BRRRRS deal to a Bank of America or Wells Fargo, they're either not going to know what you're talking about or tell you to get lost, because they have all these rules and regulations and guidelines that all of their loans have to meet because they sell them to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on the secondary market, and those are the regulations that those banks have. However, these small local banks, they don't have, billions or trillions of dollars in depository accounts, so they don't have that luxury of being picky, so they actually don't sell their notes if you're dealing with the commercial division to the secondary market. They hold them in-house. And they borrow money at the Fed's funds rate of, it was 0%, now it's 2 or 3%, and they upcharge it a few percent a month, and that's what they make their money on, is the spread. So they're people, they're usually business owners, pretty smart, and they're willing to do a lot of crazy things if you develop a relationship with them. So just these small local banks are willing to do things that these big banks aren't, because that's how they make money. Now, a lot of times I get asked, why do I even need the private lender, which I'll get into in the example, and why can't I just go straight to the bank? Because banks won't lend money on distressed properties. They won't lend money on properties that aren't, rehabbed or aren't occupied by a tenant. So you can't just take your distressed unoccupied property to a tenant. You have to take a fixed up occupied property to the bank. And then develop relationships. I want to show you an example of a bank that Lucas and I had developed relationships with. So American Bank, they're a sponsor. They were a sponsor for us. I think they still are. Lucas and I know the owner of the bank, Tim Nash. We have a cell phone number. He'll answer his phone. We've called him several times, and we developed an amazing relationship with American Bank. So in early 2020, we decided to refinance our entire rental portfolio and give it all to American Bank and pull money out. We were going to pull out about $880,000 of tax-free money. Our rental properties were worth this, and we owed this, and we were going to take out some of the equity as tax-free money. And then COVID hit, and we're like, oh shit, are they going to still perform on this? Because literally the properties got appraised, and we were just waiting on the final approval from the loan committee and the check. And about, I think probably June, so things were still kind of shut down, May or June, Lucas is holding 3 checks there that total $880,000. In the middle of COVID, they stuck to their word. No one really knew what was happening, and they cut us a check. Flash forward about 14, 16 months, everybody knew what happened. Real estate went up like crazy. Our single-family rentals that we just refinanced went up a ton. We added some more, some multifamilies. We bought some deals. We went back to American Bank to see if they would do a refinance on our new properties as well as the properties that they just did a refinance on, which most banks would not do within a year or so of their first finance. There's a check that I'm holding, 2 checks that total $1.4 million. So they gave us over $2 million of tax-free money. Now, granted, it was equity in our rentals that got appraised, so it's not like they just gave it to us. We pulled equity out of our rental portfolio, and we have to pay monthly on that. Our mortgages are a little bit higher now because we pulled out some money. But when we refinanced over a longer term, lower interest rate, and cash flowed more, as well as had a lot of money to have some flexibility with, you're not going to get that kind of treatment from a big bank, and you're not even going to get that from a small bank until you develop a relationship. So just some examples of why I always tell people to develop relationships with these small banks. You can go the traditional route for your first 10 loans. You can do a lot of those things, but Luke's and I have done everything with commercial banks, and this is a great example of the power of doing that if you develop a relationship. I look happier than Lucas, I think, or maybe I'm just shocked. All right, so on to the S, because doing it one time is great, right? You did it. I'll go over an example. You did it one time. It's super powerful, but going back and repeating is the process was, the BRRRR method: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. That's just go back and do what you did. That didn't really have as many teachable moments in it for me. So me and my team kind of took the repeat out and added the scale in there, because if your goal is to become financially free, you have to buy more than one rental property. And if you want to buy more than one, you're probably going to want to be efficient in your scaling. So this is a way to scale, kind of like the BRRRRS method. It's an acronym. So if you want to scale, you need to create systems. Now, this is the first step in this process, and it's probably the most boring one. That's why I have Lucas, because he's our systems guy, and that's why I have Matt, because he's our systems guy for education. But creating systems around each step, creating systems around buying houses, creating systems around rehabbing, around renting, and around refinancing. I mean, common sense, right? If you create a system around something, it's going to be done more efficiently the next time. So this isn't the fun part, but it's extremely important. If your goal is to scale, no one said it's going to be easy creating financial freedom, but it doesn't have to be super complicated. You just have to have the discipline to set up the systems. If you have a system to approve a good tenant quickly, you're going to cash flow more. If you have a system set up to rehab and you have the connections and the scope of work laid out, and you're not recreating a scope of work and a rehab budget every time, you have an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc that you can quickly figure out a rehab number and put a good offer on. Creating these systems isn't fun, but it is an extremely important step to scale. The C stands for coaching. You guys are all getting coached a little bit here tonight. It doesn't have to be a paid program. It can be free with social media and YouTube and everything these days. You need to lean on other people. I'm going to go over these a little bit more as well, but taking action is the next step. It's probably the biggest differentiator. And then if you want to buy more rental properties, you're going to have to get more leads. It's just a numbers game. Every 5 or 10 properties you look at, you probably buy. So you have to create more lead flow to buy more houses, and then you need to get some extra funding at some specific steps along the way. So let's talk about let's go into the case study, kind of talk about it. I'm going to show you some funding options. So here's a perfect example, simple math of a successful BRRRRS deal. So you buy a rental property, a distressed rental property, or a distressed property, I guess it's not a rental yet. You buy a distressed property for $100,000. You have some different funding options. Let's throw them all up there. So you can use a private lender, which is majority of what Luke's and I use. These are not, super, super wealthy people. These aren't people with tens of millions of dollars. They're just a working professional, usually a little bit older, that's had some time to create some income, and they want to lend it out, and they don't want to do the rehab and refine, and then, the placing a tenant. They don't have the desire to, they don't know how to, whatever it is, they just want to diversify their assets and their, whatever money they're making in the stock market. They want to diversify that into, real estate. They're usually relationship based. You can use a hard money lender. FasterFreedom is an amazing hard money lender. There's ones in pretty much every city. There's national ones. You can use a hard money lender for the purchase. You can use your own cash if you have it. You can use a line of credit on your, house or your other investment properties. There's a lot of options you can use. If you just don't have the money, that's fine. There's a lot of options you can use to find and buy that distressed property. The next step is to rehab it. So let's say you put $50,000 into this property. So you rehabbed it, now the property is ready to get rented. So some funding options, again, you can use similar to what I just talked about. You got the private money, you got a hard money lender, you can use your cash, you can use a home equity line of credit. I got a buddy in Chicago who does flips, and his first several, he did 0 for 12 or 0 for 24 month credit cards. He had 2 or 3 of them, and he put 30 or 60 grand on a couple of them, and then, 0 for 12 months, and he ended up paying them off and didn't have to use any of his own money. So you can get creative and you can mix and match. You don't have to just use one source on the rehab. So this example deal, you bought it for 100, you put 50 into it, you use some of these funding sources, so you have $150,000 in this example property that's, not your money. The next step is pretty simple. You get the property rented out. A property like that in St. Louis that's worth a couple $100,000 that you have 150 in would probably rent for $1,700 a month. On to the refinance step. So having your property taken to that small local bank I talked about, they'll do an 80% cash out refinance, meaning they will literally hand you a check, a cashier's check for 80% of the appraised value. This property appraised for 200 grand, so they will hand you a check for $160,000. Now you do owe them money on that check. You owe them, a mortgage over probably 25 years at 5%, 5.5%. But it is a check that you then go ahead and pay back whoever you borrowed the money from, whether it be yourself or somebody else, they're 150 plus interest. So that is how you're able to continue this process. Whoever you borrowed the money from or a combination of them got their money back plus interest. They're ready to do another loan, and then you can scale as I talked about. So now you have a mortgage and you own a rental property and you have taxes, insurance, maintenance. So you take your rent and cover all those expenses. So you're not using any of your own money to maintain that rental property after you bought it. All right, on to scale. So let's talk a little bit here about scaling. So the power of real estate, and then I'll get into a little bit more big of an example. So that property that I just mentioned, 15 years from now, I guess the math a little bit off, 14 years from now, real estate usually doubles every 15 years or so. So that $200,000 house, with the normal growth of real estate, it'll go up and down, but overall it goes up, is gonna be worth 400 grand in 2036, 2037. Your loan should be paid down to around 50,000. So your property that didn't use any of your own money to buy or maintain now has $350,000 of equity in 15 years. And that's just one property. Now that's cool, but that's probably not financial freedom. That's probably not life-changing for most people. However, if you do it at scale and create more properties and the velocity of wealth by doing more properties and buying more, you got, the passive wealth trifecta, something that I coined as I've been blabbing on social media over the past couple years. So Lucas and I conservatively make about $7,500 a day with what I just talked about over scale. So every single day, and this is assuming a 3% appreciation, meaning our properties go up 3% a day, which has been way more than that recently. It may be a little bit less some years in the future, but pretty conservatively, that's $3,500 a day. We collect rent and pay down our mortgages, $2,500 a day. Again, this isn't like direct deposit into my account, but it's money we're making every day through net worth and through just some of it's in our pocket. And then about $1,500 a day in cash flow. Now we have our $40 million rental portfolio, so it takes time to get there, but that's pretty good for not really doing anything. So that all boils down to $7,500 a day. So that's not, I'm not even talking about the total equity that's created over time, but just every single day at scale broken down can be pretty powerful. All right, so get a drink and then the 4 pieces of advice and we'll have some good time for Q&A. So these are 4 pieces of advice that I would give to somebody whose goal is to create financial freedom relatively soon. I would make your goals bigger. There's a Greatest Showman movie that my daughter loves, and there's a quote in there that I really like. He says hyperbole, which is exaggerating a little bit. More people suffer from dreaming too little than dreaming too big. You need to make your goals ginormous, because if you don't meet them, who cares? They're your goals. It's kind of like that Grant Cardone 10X thing. No one's going to care if you don't reach your goals. And Luke's and I did not make our goals big enough at first. Obviously, we've grown a lot, and I'll show you our new goals coming up here in a couple minutes, but we didn't make our goals big enough. Our original goal was 1 property a year for 10 years. Then, later down the line, our goal was 25 million in real estate by 2025. And, we're sitting at 40 million right now in 2022. So we've grown really, pretty quickly, but we didn't set our goals big enough. Every goal we set, we beat. And while that's cool, it's better to, I'd rather set a really, really huge, ginormous, obnoxious goal and fall a little short than set these little goals and crush them. But that's me personally. So I think most people set too small of goals. So just set a big ass goal. Say you want to retire in 24 months, or you want to be financially free in 24 months. rather than in 10 years. I promise you, in 24 months, you will be closer to being financially free than if your goal is 10 years. You may not be financially free in 2 years, but if your goal is to do it in 2 years and your goal is to do it in 10 years, you're going to be a lot further along. And shit, maybe you will be financially free in 2 years, who knows? But if your goal is 10 years, that's probably what it's going to take you. Kind of like one of those things, if you give your kids, 30 days to clean their room, it's going to take them 30 days to clean their room. You give them 1 day to clean the room, they're going to clean the room 1 day. So similarly, that metaphor actually didn't really make much sense, but you know what I'm trying to say here. Just get it, set the expectation, do things quicker and bigger and stronger, and you will get there quicker, bigger, and stronger. So the second one is to get comfortable with debt. If your goal is financial freedom and controlling your future, you're not going to do that quickly if you're not willing to have a certain comfort level with debt. Paying off your house, saving for college, doing all those things that Dave Ramsey tells you to do, that's fine advice. There's nothing wrong with that. A ton of people need that. But that is not a way to create wealth. That is not a way to quickly create a lot of money and cash flow and equity. If you don't come from money, I don't really know how going to work every day and saving your money, investing in safe investments is going to create freedom for you. It may create a little more security in your mind. It may, allow you to retire in your early 60s rather than late 60s. There's nothing wrong with it. But if your goal is financial freedom, you have to have a comfort level with properly leveraging debt, in my opinion. There's a little bit of risk there, but there's also risk in your job. I know a lot of people that, had parents get laid off, 08, 9, 2010. I know a couple people that have had their parents laid off recently and been laid off recently. Your job is a risk too. You may think that because you had a couple cocktails on that trip with your boss, he loves you or she loves you, doesn't mean that if it's your head or their head, they're not going to throw you under the bus, or you're not just a number on a spreadsheet to your company. Now, I know not all companies are that cutthroat, but it does happen, and it happens a lot. So if you think that working for somebody else is zero risk, but you think getting into debt has its risks, that's fine. But if you could kind of reverse that thought process a little bit, I think you will be closer to financial freedom than you would be just going to work every day, clocking in and clocking out. The third thing that I think you should do if you want to create financial freedom quickly is take action. I promise you that if you're an overanalyzer and if you look at every little detail and every worst case scenario, that you have thought about it way more than 95% of people. The people that are taking action and just recklessly buying and going and doing it, you've already put in way more thoughts than they have. You've already put in way more effort, way more energy. So just pull the damn trigger, because you're gonna figure it out. Real estate, as long as you do a few things right, you're gonna make it worse. You're gonna make it work. As long as there you go. It's been a long week. You're going to make it work, because real estate just provides so many opportunities. If you bought it right, but you over rehabbed it, then sell it. And you'll probably make, maybe you don't have 25% equity, but you have 10% equity. So just sell it if it didn't work, sell it and make a few grand, or break even. Or on the refinance step of the BRRRRS, you have to come out of pocket $5,000 because you over rehabbed and it didn't appraise for what you wanted. You still have a rental property that you didn't have to put 20% down on. So that's, a few grand out of pocket will get taken care of quickly on cash flow. Or your next one, you can pull out equity. Maybe you did a little bit better and you can pull out 5, 10 grand equity. So just do it. You're gonna figure it out as long as you have, a base level of knowledge and you're willing to be flexible and be agile. And then this is by far the biggest separator of successful people versus not successful people, is simply putting on your shoes and going and doing it, and not just thinking about it and analyzing it on a computer. It's getting up, going out and taking action. Is more than knowledge, more than anything I can think of, more than having connections with money, more than being a good rehabber. Just going out and taking action and figuring it out as you go is by far the biggest separator of people that you view as successful and not successful. And then the last thing is get guidance from other people, whether they're this is a huge thing for me, whether in real estate or not. So Tom Brady there in the bottom corner, most people would say he's the best quarterback, best football player ever, maybe. So I wanted to use him as an example. I didn't want anybody throwing things at me because LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan. So I didn't want to go down that route. So Tom Brady, he's a safe bet. He's the best ever, right? I mean, most people would agree. He's the best ever to play quarterback in the NFL. He has like 8 coaches. His ego is not too big. I'm the best ever. I can do it. No, he's got a nutritionist. He's got, a health and wellness coach. He's got a head coach, of course. He's got a offensive coordinator. He's got a quarterback coach. He's got that one Guerrero guy who follows him around everywhere. He's got help everywhere, and he's the best at what he does. I'm not the best at what I do. None of you probably here are the best at what you do, especially if it pertains to real estate. So thinking you can do it on your own without guidance from other people is naive, and I think it's stupid. So thinking that you can do it without leaning on others, whether it's paid or free, it doesn't have to be a paid coaching program, but thinking that you're going to do it on your own is probably pretty foolish, because I don't know one extremely successful person that isn't involved in a mastermind, in a mentorship, in a coaching program, or paid money to do something. I don't know one that I consider extremely successful. And I know a decent amount of successful people that hasn't leaned on other people's knowledge and got their guidance and direction to help get a little more efficient, because it's going to create efficiency. So you're going to learn from somebody else's mistakes. So you're going to get more efficient, and you're going to minimize your headaches, which are always annoying, and you're going to minimize your losses. You're not going to lose money at all or as much. And something that's probably not talked about is you're going to maximize the upside. So if you do a flip on your own, you made 30 grand. That's awesome. But if you had a coach that kind of showed you to be more efficient, or some guidance, maybe you would have made 50 grand. And on a BRRRRS deal, if you cashed out, 80%, maybe you could have done 70% and had a lower loan, or you could have pulled money out. So they not only help minimize the downside, you can maximize what you're doing with a little bit of guidance. All right, so what's next? Short term and then long term. So like I said, we just launched Ordinary Guys Extraordinary Wealth podcast. We got a round of applause earlier for it, so a few of you have been listening to it. So check that out. We literally just launched it 7 days ago, so a week ago, 8 days ago. Lucas and I also did a piece for PBS. So here, I think next month, there's going to be a 5-minute documentary coming out about alternative investing, real estate being the alternative investment. It's called Viewpoint. It's hosted by Dennis Quaid. It's going to air for an entire year on PBS because they no commercials. So 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning or end of TV shows, that dead space that the shows that they have on there that don't have commercials. So that's going to air along with obviously all the other programs, but that's a pretty cool opportunity that's happened for us recently. And then book, I got a book coming out. I don't know what it's going to be called. I've written 11 of the 12 chapters, so we got to get that figured out soon. We got a book coming out here that kind of goes over a lot of the stuff in a lot more detail coming up. So that's some immediate what's next for us. So what's next long-term for us? And the word is growth right now, whether that's smart or naive or we're just young and dumb, we are going to grow and go for it. So immediately we're going to continue to grow FasterFreedom, try to get more followers, more students. We have about 750 students across the country right now in the mentorship, a couple million followers. The goal is to continue to grow that. And Faster House, 300 houses this year. I think 500 houses in 2 years is the goal. So we're going to continue to grow those companies. And Luke and I are going to continue to add rentals at as quick pace as we can. Every single family rental that I buy, in my head, I'm just like, over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to make 200 grand with that passive wealth trifecta, with the properties going up, notes getting paid down in cash flow. Now, will some be less, some be more? Yeah, but why wouldn't you continue to do that if you're willing to, if you have the systems in place for it? And we're going to diversify in some other businesses. Next year, we're going to start an investment company where we're going to buy other companies and just, go hard into real estate, but also diversify outside of that space. Goal is to own $1 billion in real estate. Now, I don't know if we would do all of that with none of our own money, but the goal is to own $1 billion in real estate. Like I said, we're not shooting small anymore. We're going for it. Maybe even cooler, the goal is to bring an NBA team to St. Louis. I was thinking we'd get more laughs out of that one. St. Louis isn't the most exciting city. You have to lure an NBA team in. You have to make a ton of connections. So we're thinking the Archers, maybe like Get at the Arch and a basketball, or maybe like the Toasted Raviolis, or I know we don't have a name yet, but the Hustlers maybe with STL. So anyway, so I want to talk about why the NBA team, aside from that being a cool goal, it would mean that we checked all of the boxes. If we were to bring an NBA team to St. Louis, we would have made a shit ton of money, we would have made a ton of connections, we would have made St. Louis a more desirable city. The NBA is not going to, start a team or send a team to a dying city. So we would have made St. Louis extremely desirable. We would have made connections with people in St. Louis. We would have made St. Louis better. We would be bringing a ton of jobs to St. Louis. We'd be making connections with billionaires and a lot of people, and being at the table with a lot of other way smarter than us people. So will all of those things happen? I don't know. Maybe. Will some of them happen? Yeah, probably. So who knows? We're going for it. And then creating massive impact, which we feel like we're starting to do that. Lucas talked earlier about greater giving. We've raised over $250,000 in the first year and a half of that nonprofit. The goal is to just do that, nonstop and continue to help and impact the community with our businesses, but also with the nonprofit. All right, just wanted to throw this up. They're not going to go into a huge pitch here, but we're launching next week a Corp Online. It's the mentorship, but it is 300 videos, 100 resources on how to build or run a portfolio without using any of your own money. So it's a lot in there. And we're launching next week, offering 50% off. So just text Matt right there, your email address if you're interested. He will send you an email with how to sign up either this week or next week. If not, no big deal, but we're offering 50% off of that if you're here tonight, or go to FasterFreedom.com to check it out. So before we get into Q&A, I don't see a clock, I don't even know where we are on time, but what's our view count? What did we get to? If it's not close to 25,000, just make something up. What? 4,000? 4,000. We didn't even come close. Yikes. Well,
I think 4,000 is pretty damn good, man.
Yeah, we must have had some screw ups, because if I go live on TikTok and Instagram, like during the day, we usually get 10,000. So we must have had some screw ups along the way, but that's all right. Awesome. So we did not get there, but that's all right. So that's what I got for you.
Before we get into Q&A, give Sam Primm a round of applause.
You might as well Q&A. You could probably answer questions as much as I can.
I'll be running mics.
All right. Any questions before we get to the music and the open bar, because Lucas has a tab open? Oh, shirts? Oh, yeah, we got shirts. We'll throw out shirts for questions. Yep. Yeah. What do you got?
Hey, so I finished my first BRRRR about a month ago and completely screwed the rehab budget. I'm usually pretty handy, but I just did not know what was needed to go into this house. What are some resources you guys have to learn how to do the estimating on the rehab?
So yeah, that's something that's going to come with experience and time. Here's your T-shirt. Oh, threw a little short. Didn't want to hit too many. So if Matt's got the sizes, if that size doesn't fit you, I'm throwing out larger. So if you need something different, you can talk to Matt at the end. But so some resources, you're going to just get better with it. I mean, you're going to screw up your first few. It kind of is what it is. Hopefully you didn't go too bad over the budget. You can still make it work. But I mean, we have the mentorship that I talked about. We talk about rehabbing a lot in there. We have the online, the Corp Online, as well as the mentorship. So we do have that, learn by watching videos and, talking to other people. There's probably a lot of really successful rehabbers in here I would try and chat with. You can maybe have them come to your property. There's one right here, Nick, right there in the orange shirt. He's done a lot of rehabs for Lucas and I. He's does really, really quality work, and he can help you, run the project for you and probably get it done quicker and better. So, I mean, there's unlimited resources in this room aside from just watching videos and talk with other people. So, but we have a mentorship as well.
We got Mike right here.
What's up, Mike?
Hi, how y'all doing? Insurance. We're about to start something in a couple of weeks ourselves. The process of getting insurance, having that rehab insurance, getting insurance information. Just how did y'all go about getting insurance and the pathway of making sure that the rehab is covered and the house after the rehab?
Yeah, so we talked to a few different people. Ryan Mike, who was up here earlier, perfect example. He does all our rehab insurance. You need special insurance for rehab properties, that are vacant, that are getting worked on. So, Lindenwood Agency is a great option. There's a ton of insurance brokers out there that you can contact. Just let them know that you're doing a rehab, you need, vacant rehab insurance. And then after the fact, John Micah's not just a pitch all our trusted vendors, but John Micah, he has insurance on every single one of Luke's and I, single family rentals and Brian's, and probably most people in here, he probably has insurance on, I don't even know, thousands of rental properties, and it's the best coverage you can get for the lowest price. So everything you need is here in this room, but you can obviously go look at other sources.
Hi, my name's Kim. Sam, great presentation, thank you. I work for an investor here in St. Louis, and she really wanted to be here, but she had an emergency in the family. She's watching live. But her question is, she wanted to know kind of how do you pick a general area with your rental portfolio? She has a couple rental properties, so she just wants to know how you narrow down your area if you have a specific one.
Yeah, so we kind of do. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. We did it 30-ish minutes from our office. We were in northern St. Charles County, now we're here, but 30-ish, 45 minutes from here, because you don't, in my opinion, you don't really want to have, Brian always tells a story. I think he had a rental in like south of Sullivan and one in Hawk Point, which is like 2 hours away, and he had a maintenance call at each, and his maintenance person spent 4 or 5 hours on the road that day. So we like to have them within 30 minutes for just efficiency of going to check out the properties, for maintenance, just having them close. And I like B-class areas where you're going to get a decent amount of cash flow. It's a working class area where there's a lot of owner occupants and a few rentals in that area. That's usually you get a decent amount of cash flow with also the upside of appreciation. If you go in more of those, C or D areas, you're going to get more cash flow, but you're not going to get, property growth. And A areas are pretty tough to have rentals in because they don't cash flow. So we like to just kind of stick to our buy box is 30 minutes to the office. We like to have stuff built after 1960, 1970 to get away from a lot of that old construction that's kind of a pain. So that's our buy box, but it's just kind of whatever you're comfortable with, and having an area that you know really well is super helpful because you can figure out rents right away and figure out what things are worth.
Joe. Yeah, hi, it's, Joe Wolf. Hey, about acquisition, you talked about wholesalers, real estate agents, social media. Do you guys do any of your own marketing, like texting or mailing or anything like that? Or
We do. So we have been doing TV. Lucas, I don't know if you've seen his shiny mug and face on TV. So we did TV, we do text, we've done a little bit of texting, we've done Driving for Dollars, we do direct mail, we've done Facebook ads, we've done Google AdWords, we've done a lot of stuff. And of the 300 houses we're going to buy this year, my guess would be 185 of them, 195 are going to be from networking, $0 in marketing spend. So if you are not willing to commit a couple grand a month for several months in a row, I would not suggest doing much marketing. I would drive for dollars if I was going to spend a little bit of money, and then I would talk to wholesalers and real estate agents. But we've tried a little bit of everything. I think it's, for what we do, it costs 3, 4, 5 grand a house to buy it with the cost to actually get a house after what we spent. So it's not a cheap way to do it, but it's we're spending 4 grand to buy a house that hopefully we're making 30, 40 grand out. So it's still a good investment, but you have to be consistent. You're not going to send out one direct mail campaign for $2,500 and get a ton of buys. You're going to have to do that for 6 months in a row, and you will get buys from it, but you have to have the money and the outlay and the patience to wait on them to come in. So we do a lot of ourselves, but we leave a lot of it to other experts and just buy it from them.
How you doing?
Good,
My name's Ken. I just want to know your views on tax lien properties. If you feel those are good avenues to find properties, and do you all have any attorneys in the group to answer real estate legal questions, or anybody involved with you all?
Yeah, so the legal side, I don't know if we have a ton of attorneys in the group. We've used a couple, but I would definitely post that in like the Facebook group and other Facebook groups. But as far as tax liens, we've bought, houses at the courthouse steps and things like that, but it's been several years. So, I know there's a process with, the tax liens, and, you can buy a property and then the owner can, buy it back, and, you can make a spread. So I'm not an expert on the tax lien, so I'm not going to make up too much about it. If you can find any source that will get you a distressed property that you're comfortable with, I think that's a great avenue to pursue. If you have a little more expertise on that, there may be somebody in the room or somebody, that you can chat with about it, but we haven't done a ton of tax lien properties, no.
Hey, Sam. My name's Alex. I just wanted to ask you, in regards to multifamily properties, how do you get the private money investor or private capital to be comfortable with taking a second position on a property where the bank holds the first position. Because every private money investor I've talked to really does not like that approach with it, especially with the market being kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah, for sure. So
Besides personal guarantees as well, because I mean that's a gimme. But
yeah, so kind of what we do, and I'll take two more questions. Maybe I don't want to be up here all night for the people that want to get to the bar. We can chat after. So two more after this if there's two more. So there's a few things that we do. So private lenders, usually it's a relationship that you've developed over time. It's not somebody that you just met or that you kind of know on the fringe. It's usually somebody that you've known for a while. And that, you got the personal guarantee, you're listing them as an additional insured on the, insurance certificate. They can have a lien on the property if they're not made an owner. A lot of what you could do maybe is give them partial ownership in the property until you pay them back with the refinance. So what we do for quick math, let's say we're buying $1 million apartment complex. We'll raise $200,000 from a private lender. We'll put that down on it. We'll have the bank note for $800,000, and then over the next 2 or 3 years, we pay the private lender, monthly cash flow, and then we've created enough value that the property's probably worth 1.3, 1.4 at that time, and we'll take that equity and pay back the lender their money. But it just takes, it takes the right private lender. It just takes a relationship that you've built. It takes showing them the deal, showing them the example, showing them the best case scenario, the worst case scenario. Like you said, there's not much safer investment if you're personally guaranteeing it than that besides a savings account, but that's only insured up to $250,000. So, it's kind of a roundabout answer, but most of the time it's just the relationship that you've developed and then showing them, getting them comfort level with how you're going to manage the asset after they give you the money with examples and experience if you have it. Sam.
Is there a way to do, the BRRRR method without the rehab part?
If you buy a house cheap enough, yeah, we've done that a little bit, on package deals or things like that. If you buy it and in 2 or 3 months or whatever it is, if there's enough equity that you can pay, the initial lender back without rehabbing it, for sure, you just got to buy it at that deep of a discount, which it has been really tough. I don't think it's going to be as tough in this next 12, 24 months, but the past 24 months has been really tough because why wouldn't they just throw it on the market or, take the highest bidder with other wholesalers? So you can for sure. One more. Got.
No, we got to stand up with the mic. Yeah.
Stand up. Don't kick me.
You mentioned that you were, doing real estate part-time for, 4 or 5 years before you got into it full-time. But what advice would you give someone, who's working a full-time job while trying to build a rental portfolio on the side?
Honestly, partner with somebody that you know and trust. And Luke's and I did that, and it's stuck so far. But you can always partner with somebody. You can always partner with somebody on a couple rentals, and if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you just own 2 or 3 rentals with that person, and you're probably further along. Because I get asked a decent amount, why don't you just do it on your own? Why don't you could own 100% of that $40 million? No, if I did on my own, I'd probably have $5 million. So it's not with the right partner. It's not 1 + 1 = 2 or 3. With us, it's 1 + 1 = 100. So having somebody that you can trust and lean on that can pick you up when you're down or take certain tasks or have more available time one weekend than you have will just make it happen so much faster. And I'd rather have 50% of $40 million than 100% of $5 million. So that's what I say with that. But